Today's movie is Like Mike, a fun and heartwarming film from 2002 about a young orphan who magically becomes a basketball star. Calvin Cambridge is a teenage boy who lives in an orphanage with his two best friends. Murph and Reg. Murph is the youngest of the trio and has a very close bond with Calvin. They love playing basketball together in the yard. One day, a group of bullies led by a guy named Ox challenges Calvin to a game. They bet that if Calvin loses, Ox gets Calvin's favorite basketball jersey. Calvin's friends advise him to ignore the bully, but Calvin decides to accept the challenge, inspired by his favorite basketball players. During the game, Ox easily wins because he's much taller than Calvin. As a result, Ox takes Calvin's jersey and tears it apart to annoy him. Every night the kids are forced to sell chocolates by the mean orphanage director, Stan Bittleman, after each home game of the NBA team, the Los Angeles Knights. One night, while selling chocolates, Calvin meets the coach of the Los Angeles Knights. The coach is impressed by how much Calvin knows about basketball and by his honesty about selling the chocolates. Because of this, the coach gives Calvin tickets to the next game. The next day, a group of couples visits the orphanage to adopt a child. Calvin feels hopeful that he might find a family, but he quickly realizes that the couples are only interested in adopting younger kids, not teenagers like him. Later on, someone donates a box of clothes to the orphanage from a thrift store. This means that the orphanage receives clothes that someone has given away for free or sold at a low price. These donated clothes might be used by Calvin and the other kids at the orphanage because they might not have many new clothes of their own. In a donation box at a thrift store, Calvin finds a pair of old sneakers with MJ written on them. They once belonged to Michael Jordan, a famous basketball player. Calvin is really happy about his discovery and takes the sneakers home, not knowing there's something magical about them. When Calvin decides to retrieve his sneakers that jealous bully Ox threw onto a tall power line, he waits until everyone else is asleep and it's pouring rain outside. Calvin wakes up Murph and Reg, and together they brave the heavy rainfall to get to the sneakers. Calvin manages to climb a tree near the power line where the sneakers are stuck. As he reaches out to grab them, a sudden bolt of lightning strikes. The force of the lightning makes Calvin lose his grip, and he falls to the ground with sneakers. Luckily, Calvin isn't seriously hurt by the lightning strike. As he picks himself up, he notices something strange about the sneakers. They seem to be charged with an unusual energy or force. Despite the shocking experience, Calvin doesn't think too much about it initially, focusing instead on retrieving his prized sneakers from the ground. Little does Calvin know, this shocking moment is going to change his life in a big way. The next day, Calvin and his friends are super excited to go watch the Los Angeles Knights play against the Minnesota Timberwolves. During halftime, the Knights' best player, Tracy Reynolds, organizes a contest. Calvin can't believe it when they call out his ticket number, and suddenly he's standing right next to Tracy on the court. Calvin feels nervous but also thrilled. He takes his shot and makes an amazing slam dunk by bouncing the ball off the backboard. The crowd goes wild, cheering loudly for Calvin. Even his friend Reg is jumping with joy. Calvin is shocked but happy when everyone gives him a standing ovation. After this incredible moment, the Knights decide to sign Calvin to play in their next game on a special one-day contract. But Calvin quickly realizes that being part of the team means more than just playing basketball. In their game against the tough San Antonio Spurs, the Knights start losing early on. Coach Wagner sees they need a change, so he puts Calvin into play during the fourth quarter. Calvin steps onto the court and sparks a huge comeback against the Spurs. With his skills and teamwork, the Knights turn the game around and win in a thrilling finish. This big moment leads to Calvin earning a contract to play with the team for the whole season. Calvin's fresh ideas and talent help the Knights become one of the best teams in the league. It's not just about scoring points. Calvin brings everyone together and boosts their spirits, making them a team to watch out for in basketball. Since Calvin is still young, Coach Wagner decides that Tracy should look after him and be his mentor. Tracy isn't too happy about this at first. One night, Tracy accidentally takes sleeping pills and falls asleep while driving. Calvin has to take over and drive them safely back to the hotel. This saves Tracy from getting in trouble for breaking curfew. Even though Calvin gets benched for joyriding, Tracy starts to see Calvin differently. They start spending more time together, and their friendship begins to grow. Later on, Bittleman, greedy head of the orphanage, makes a deal with the team that says all the money Calvin earns will go to him until Calvin turns 18 or gets adopted. When it seems like adoption might happen, Bittleman gets desperate. He steals Calvin's special sneakers and makes a huge bet against the Knights, putting $100,000 on the line. Calvin's friends convince Ox, the bully, and his friends that Bittleman is only thinking about himself. Ox decides to take the sneakers from Bittleman's safe. The kids rush to the arena with Calvin's sneakers, but Bittleman manages to escape. He sends some tough guys after Calvin, trying to get the shoes back, but they don't succeed. After the third quarter, the Knights are losing badly to Vince Carter and the Toronto Raptors, with the score at 80-59. Calvin finally gets back to the arena with his sneakers. He's almost benched for being late, but Tracy and the rest of the team convince Coach Wagner to let Calvin play. With Calvin on the court, the Knights start making a comeback. Towards the end of the game, during a big pile-up, Calvin's sneakers get ruined. The Knights are trailing the Raptors, 103-102. Without his magical shoes and wanting to return to a normal life, Calvin tells the team that this will be his last game, no matter what. In the final play, Calvin fakes a shot to make Vince Carter jump, and then passes the ball to Tracy. Tracy makes the game-winning shot just as the buzzer sounds. The Knights win the game, 104-103, and secure their first playoff spot, after returning to the orphanage, which is now entirely different. Tracy tells Calvin about his plans to adopt a child, and asks him if he wants to be his son. Calvin agrees on the condition that Murph will also come with him. Calvin and Murph get adopted by Tracy. Reg is adopted by a different family, but they all stay in touch. Bittleman, who doesn't have the money to subscribe for more great content, hit the like button to show your support and leave a comment if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care, sharks, or to escape punishment for how he treated Calvin and the other kids. The orphanage is now sponsored by the Knights, making life better for all the kids there. That was the story of Calvin Cambridge and his incredible journey. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to pay his bet, disappears. He likely goes into hiding to avoid the lone